Welcome to NEXTGames, a guide to Ninja series. In this episode, we will go over TP gear sets that include Dual Wield. Now in our previous video, we focused on two primary stats when it came to TP gain, which were multi-hit and store TP. However, this was taking into account that we had capped magical haste buffs on us from either our trust or other party members. If we do not have capped magical haste, then we need to prioritize Dual Wield stat on gear before anything else. The amount you are shooting for will of course depend on how much magical haste you currently have. Let's spend a minute delving into what all this means before we get started on the actual gear sets. First, it's important to understand that you want to get as close to the weapon delay reduction cap as possible with your equipment, job ability, and magical haste buffs first, and then if necessary by adding on Dual Wield gear. This is because Dual Wield will reduce your overall TP per swing, while haste will not. So what goes into the weapon delay reduction cap? Well, equipment haste is capped at 25%. So we will always assume that our equipment haste is capped at that 25% because pretty much all gear sets these days will give you that amount of haste. Now let's move on to job ability haste. This is capped at 25% as well. Now sadly, Ninja only has a single job ability available to them that can give them job haste, which is Haste Samba, which is what you get when you use the Dancer sub-job. Now that Haste Samba is only going to give you a 5% boost here. The 10% boost that you will get to your double attack by using the Warrior sub-job is much more useful when it comes to TP gain, so that's why we don't even really bother with this stat and just assume that our job ability haste will always be at 0. This brings us to Magical Haste. Magical Haste caps at 43.75%. So since we're always assuming that equipment haste is capped, and that we don't have any job ability haste, this is the number we are always trying to achieve. Now, Haste 1 will give us 15% magical haste. Haste 2, 30. This is what makes trusts like Korumoru so useful, as he will almost always keep Haste 2 on you, making it so you're always just under 14% away from the cap. Victory March from Ulmia or Joachim as trust will give us 15% roughly. Advancing March from Ulmia will give you an additional 10.5. Now, if you're going to go ahead and use party members as opposed to trust to give these buffs, then depending on how the bard's equipped, you can get Victory March to do up to 28.61% magical haste, Advancing March up to 18.9% magical haste. Basically, in essence, they're capping your magical haste with just using a well-equipped bard. Or you can go to a well-equipped Geomancer, especially if they have an Idris, and use Geo Haste that will get anywhere from 30 to 40.9% magical haste. So now that we know the exact number that we need in magical haste, and what the different magical haste spells give us, let's go ahead and look at Dual Wield and how much of it is needed to make sure we are hitting the 80% delay reduction cap. Now as we go over these numbers, remember that Ninja automatically is going to have a Dual Wield 35 trait that's already included in these calculations. When we have capped equipment haste at 25% and magical haste at 43.75%, that means that we only need one Dual Wield to hit that 80% delay reduction cap. There isn't any Dual Wield gear that serves as a good replacement for one of the pieces discussed in the previous Dual Wield 0 gear set video, so we usually just ignore the need for Dual Wield 1 in this instance. When we have capped equipment and only 30% magic haste, such as when we only have haste 2 on us, we now need 21 Dual Wield to reach that delay reduction cap, so an increase of 20. When we have capped equipment haste and only 15% magical haste, such as when we only have haste 1 on us, we now increase that by 11 and need 32 Dual Wield to reach that 80% delay reduction cap. Lastly, when we have capped equipment haste and no magical haste on us of any kind, we need 39 Dual Wield to reach the delay reduction cap. So this means that we will be looking for a set with roughly 21 Dual Wield on it, which I call a Dual Wield 20 gear set, for use when we have roughly 30% magical haste on us, and a set with roughly 39 Dual Wield on it, for what I call our Dual Wield 40 gear set. Now obviously there are lots of combinations in between, but those two sets should make it so that you're always close to what you need in regards to the proper amount of Dual Wield gear. So now what I'm going to do is go over each slot and the viable options for Dual Wield gear in that slot. I will then show you some of the ideal gear sets at the end of this to mix it all together and get the Dual Wield 21 and Dual Wield 39 that you are looking for. First, let's talk about the ammo slot. For maximum TP gain, you absolutely want to be using a shuriken here thanks to your Daken effect. We basically only have a single option when it comes to our shuriken, and that is the Seki shuriken, which will give us a store TP bonus of +2. This is dropped from Archangel GK in Eshin Ruan. Now, if you can't get this shuriken or want a more tank-minded setup, you can also use the Date shuriken, which can be gotten for 80 domain invasion points, and can definitely be used if you haven't had a chance to get your hands on a Seki shuriken yet. Next, we will skip to the next slot, as it's the only other slot besides ammo that doesn't have any dual wield options. Thankfully, there is a decisive winner here, and that is the Ninja Nodowa +2, upgraded to rank 25. Due to its store TP and the increase to your Daken activation rate, it is unparalleled in what it can do. Obviously, if you can't afford the cost of this item, then the +1 is the next best option at rank 20. The best way to upgrade these is by killing mobs in Dynamis D. However, if you don't have the option or a group to go with, another way to upgrade these is by using heroism crystals purchased off the auction house. Next, we will go over the head slot. Now here there are two good options with the dual wield stat. The first and the best in slot option is the Ryu Somin +1. It'll give you a dual wield stat of +9 and an additional 7 store TP. Additionally, if you augment this, on path A, you will get an additional 12 strength, 12 dex, and 20 accuracy, and on path C, you'll get an additional 65 hit points, and most importantly, 5 more store TP and 8 more subtle blow, which will allow you to more easily reach that subtle blow cap in this gear set. This is why I prefer going with path C, but path A is also a viable option. To get the Ryu Somin +1, you'll first need to get the Aryan Abjuration head off of either Zuram for 400 domain invasion points, or getting it to drop off Hanbi in Eshin Ruan. Then, you need to purchase a Jinxed Somin off the auction house for 10 to 15 million gil. Once you get the item uncursed, you will then finish this piece by augmenting it with either path A or path C. Now really the only possible alternative to the Ryu Somin +1 is the Hattori Zukin +1. Now this is a dual wield stat of 7 on it, and a double attack stat of 9%. However, it's situational in that it's only active when Inen is up and you are behind the enemy. Now this is not nearly as good as the Ryu Somin +1, but situationally can be useful, and if you don't have the Ryu Somin +1 yet, this can be used in the meantime. Next, let's go over earrings. There are two dual wield options for earrings. The first is the Supa no Mimi. This will give you a dual wield stat of +5, and an agi bonus of +2. You can acquire it from the Divine Might fight. The other option that you have available to you is the Ibani earring. Now it will only give you a dual wield bonus of +4, but it does also have a bunch of other nice stats on it, such as a hit point bonus of 45, an evasion bonus of 15, and a magic evasion bonus of 8. You can acquire this earring from Zuram for 100 domain invasion points. Next, let's move on to bodies. Now there are 3 solid options for dual wield bodies depending on exactly how much dual wield you need and what your other goals are. First, let's start with the Adamar Jacket +1. This gives you a dual wield bonus of 6 and also gives you a triple attack bonus of 4%, making it an excellent TP piece. You can also augment it, and on path A, get an additional 12 dex, 12 agi, and 20 accuracy. Now to acquire this, you need to get the Jovian Abjuration off of Zuram for 400 domain invasion points, or you can get it to drop off Pekit in Eshin Ruan. After you have that, you then need to get a Jinxed Jacket off of the auction house for 30 million gil roughly, and then you can uncurse it and augment it. Alternatively, you can get the Mochizuki Chainmail +3. Now this will actually give you more of a dual wield bonus at a +9 stat, and additionally, it will have your Daken effect activate an additional 10% of the time. So between this and your +2 neck, you'll have Daken activating 35% of the time more than you would without those 2 pieces. This is also an excellent TP piece, and the one I prefer in my dual wield 40 sets. Now the third option is Hachia Chainmail +3. Now it actually has an additional +1 dual wield, so it gives you a bonus of 10 to your dual wield stat. However, it does not really help with your TP gain in any other way, so it's lacking the triple attack +4 and the Daken activation rate that the other 2 bodies would offer. Instead, it offers a subtle blow +9, so if you're having difficulty capping that, you definitely can get more of the stat here, and then it also will increase your critical hit rate by 8%. But again, sadly, neither of those two items are actually going to help you with your TP gain, which usually means you'll want to use the other two bodies over this one unless you just do not have them. The next slot we'll go over is the hand slot, and there's really only a single dual wield option here. That is the floral gauntlets. This will give you a dual wield bonus of 5, and if augmented correctly, a triple attack bonus of 3%. Now you can get this from Sinister Rain, and it's one of the possible drops if you defeat Razulacia. Now, the possible augments you can get on it are accuracy plus 15, ranged accuracy plus 15, the triple attack 3% that I previously mentioned, and magic damage taken minus 4%. So you'll definitely have to do this fight several times in order to get these augments that you're looking for, but this is a very good piece with dual wield on it and triple attack 3% if you can get it augmented correctly. For the rings, we really only have one possible option, and that is the Haverton Ring plus 1, as it's the only ring with dual wield stat on it. It will give you dual wield plus 6. Now you can get this from completing the Yignis Directive, which basically means you have to defeat all of the quests and all of the missions and content inside of Seekers of Adulin. Now, if you haven't gotten that far yet, you could just defeat the regular missions in Seekers of Adulin and get the Haverton Ring, which only has one less dual wield at dual wield plus 5. Now to be perfectly clear, there is a large number of options available to you in regards to rings when you complete these missions, and frankly this is probably one of the least useful ones in the bunch. So it isn't normal that you'd have this ring, but if for whatever reason you are looking for 5 to 6 more dual wield in your setup, you could potentially get it here. The next slot we're going to talk about is the back slot, where there is really only a single option when it comes to dual wield, and that is the Andartia's Mantle. Now with this, you're simply going to add the augment of dual wield plus 10 to it. This is going to be instead of double attack plus 10 or store TP plus 10. Now additionally on this, you're going to have dex plus 20, accuracy plus 30, attack plus 20, and damage taken reduction of 5%. And you'll get this of course from Ambuscade. Now normally you're going to want to get your dual wield from other places in your gear set, because you'll want either that store TP or that double attack stat on here. But know that if you are having difficulty coming up with that 40 for your dual wield 40 set, that this is a place just like those rings where you can get an easy 10 if you're having difficulty with the current gear available to you. Next, let's talk about the waist slot. For the waist slot, there's a variety of options that you can use in your dual wield setups. The first and the best in slot option is the Riki Yotai. Now this will give you a dual wield bonus of 7, a store TP bonus of 4, and an accuracy bonus of 10. You can get it off of Koryu and Eshiruan. Now sadly, this is just one of those pieces that so many jobs can benefit from that most of the people in your link shell are probably going to want it. So this is also one of those pieces that is on most people's most wanted list. So there will be a chance you just won't be able to get this piece. I sadly don't have it yet, for instance. Therefore, it's a good idea to take a close look at the other options available in this slot and see just how different they are from the Reki. The first alternative we'll discuss is the Patentia Sash. Now this will enhance your dual wield by 5 and give you an additional store TP bonus of 5 as well. So it'll be 2 less dual wield than the Reki, but 1 more store TP. So if accuracy isn't an issue, and you indeed only needed 5 dual wield to make your set instead of 7, then this actually will end up pulling ahead of that Reki, so it's a very worthwhile alternative. Additionally, you can try the Girder Belt plus 1. Now it'll give you 1 less dual wield still, so only 4, but it will give you an additional store TP once again. So therefore you're actually going to have 2 more store TP than the Reki. So if indeed you only needed 4 dual wield to get the maximum cap that you needed, then indeed this would pull ahead of both the other 2. Additionally, it's going to give you a dex and agi bonus of 7 and a critical hit rate bonus of 4%. So definitely keep both those options in mind if you don't have the Reki yet, or if indeed you don't need that full dual wield 7 that it offers. You can get the Sash from CS Apollyon 2, or just for 1 to 2 million gil off the auction house, and the Girder Belt is a fairly new item, so it's still about 100 mil in the auction house, but look for that to come down over the next year. We'll also discuss 2 more options when it comes to the waist. The first one is the Sheetal Stone. Now this will give you a dual wield trait of plus 6, so only 1 less than the Reki, but it has no store TP on it and no accuracy. Instead, it has 5 agi that it gives you, and additionally 10 evasion. You can get this from the Headwind 2 HTMB fight. Now this kind of falls behind all the other options in the fact that it doesn't have any other store TP on it or TP gaining abilities, but it is one of the easier ones to obtain. The easiest one to obtain is the NEXTGames sash, which we'll talk about next. This gives you a dual wield trait of 5, gives you a subtle blow trait of 5, so if you haven't gotten the 18 subtle blow that you need through your gear, this is another way to achieve that, and then gives you an evasion boost of 5. You can get this from Karkanos in Abyssielethane. So those are the 5 different options available to you in regards to dual wield, all giving you anywhere from 4 to 7 dual wield, and then additionally some other stats that will help you with your TP gain, such as store TP. Let's go ahead and move on to the legs now. Now for the legs, there are 2 options depending on how much dual wield you are going for. The first, and the best option, is the Mochizuki Hakama plus 3, which will give you a dual wield boost of 10. Now sadly, there are no other TP bonus stats in regards to this piece, so it's just that you're relying upon, which is why it usually gets neglected in endgame. But it is a solid 10 points of dual wield that you can get if you're lacking it in other areas. Now the other piece you can use in this slot is the Hachiya Hakama plus 3. This will only give you a dual wield boost of 5, so half that of the Mochizuki, but it will additionally give you a store TP boost of 6 and a subtle blow boost of 9. So if you're still tracing that 18 subtle blow points you need, this is yet another way to achieve that. This brings us to our final slot, the feet. Now again, there are 2 options. The Hizumaru Sun 8 plus 2 will give you dual wield plus 8, and because of all the differences listed here, is considered the best in slot option. Now, second to this, we can get Taeon boots from Alluvian Skirmish. If we do this, and it comes with a native dual wield plus 4 stat on it, we can also augment it to eventually get a dual wield plus 5 stat for a total of dual wield plus 9. So in the regard of strictly dual wield and TP gain, this should come out ahead. However, it only has a 3-point agi and 7-point ranged accuracy boost over the Hizumaru Sun 8, compared to all of those other benefits that you see there on the left-hand side. This is why the Hizumaru Sun 8 plus 2 is normally considered the best in slot option, but if you need just one more dual wield to get that 21 or 39 that you're trying to get in your set, this is a place that you can attain it. Okay, one final note, and that is on Augment Gear. Now the Herculean set from Zenma can be augmented with up to dual wield plus 6. Now it's not going to be the best in slot for any of the pieces you augment, but if you do get plus 6 on it, and are missing some of the dual wield pieces that we spoke of in this video, this is a way to get that dual wield set built in the meantime until you get those pieces. Likewise, the Taeon set from Alluvian Skirmish can be augmented with up to dual wield plus 5. Again, it won't be quite as good as the potential plus 6 you get from Herculean, and it's not going to be best in slot, but it is still a viable option early on for a dual wield gear setup. So just know that if you can't quite obtain some of the pieces in this video, here are some other ways that you can get some of your dual wield gear and stats into your setup. Now you may be asking yourself why it is you would even spend time getting gear with dual wield, and if it's really even that important. And I definitely want to answer that with, it is single-handedly the most important way you can increase your DPS as a ninja. Obviously, multi-hit's going to play a big role. Store TP is going to play a big role both into your TP gain and therefore how many weapon skills you can get in. But before all of that, making a bigger difference than anything, if your weapon delay reduction is not capped at 80%, you are going to lose your biggest DPS chunk there. Now, I've gone ahead and made a series of videos that I'm going to show you here over the next few minutes that'll demonstrate exactly how much of a difference this can make. But first, I just wanted to make sure I emphasized what the importance was of the different stats when it comes to TP gain as we build these dual wield gear sets. Now, as we saw in the last video, when we have capped magical haste, the order of importance in regards to the stats we're looking for on our gear is first quadruple attack, then triple attack, and then it's kind of a tie between double attack and store TP. And what I mean by that is if you have a large amount of quadruple attack and triple attack, it is going to lessen the chances of double attack actually activating. And in that scenario, store TP definitely pulls ahead of double attack in regards to importance, because double attack is not going to have the opportunity to activate as often as it would have if you didn't have those high quad and triple attack numbers. However, if you don't have a lot of quadruple and triple attack, double attack pulls slightly ahead of store TP in the TP gain compartment because it will be activating more often. Now, how this changes when we get to our dual wield set is that dual wield stat is now much more important than all of the others. Now, double attack and store TP still kind of share there at the bottom in regards to importance, depending on how much triple and quadruple attack you're using. But that dual wield is definitely the most important statistic until you can get all the way down to that 80% delay reduction cap. Now, the reason this is all so important is that lots of people aren't going to have all of the gear that I'm going to mention here in the best in slot options because some of it is rather rare. But what's important with the dual wield gear sets is that they are quite interchangeable and you can change lots of the pieces with very little change to your overall DPS as long as you try and follow the rules that you see here on the right hand side, always trying to utilize the best stats that are available to you in the different slots. Let's go ahead and see how some of these sets look when we put them together. So now what we need to do is take that dual wield 0 gear set that we talked about in the previous video and see where we can add dual wield pieces in order to achieve the number that we're looking for. Let's go ahead and start with the most extreme example of dual wield 39, or what we would use when we have no magical haste. Now if we configure all of the pieces in the correct configuration, the most ideal setup for DPS output is going to be the one that you're seeing right here. This includes the Ryu Somen +1 on path C, Ninja Nodowa +2, the Supa Anomimi alongside the Ibana earring, Adamar jacket +1 on path A, Adamar wrist +1 on path A, gear ring alongside Epona's ring, and Artia's mantle with the double attack 10% on it, Reki Yotai, Samnua tights, Hizamaru Sun 8 +2, and a Seki shuriken. Now, even though this is the ideal configuration, there are many other configurations that are almost identical to it on both the parsers and the spreadsheets. So let's go ahead and just talk about how we can easily make some swaps here in case we can't get our hands on all of these pieces of gear. The swap I prefer if you're missing the Reki Yotai is to swap in a Mochizuki chainmail +3 into the body slot and a girder belt +1 for your waist. Now you're going to lose 4% triple attack, but you gain 10 to your Dakin effect and you gain 2 store TP while still maintaining your dual wield 39. If you don't want to spend all that gil on a girder belt +1, or it's hard to find on your server, you can also simply get a Potentia sash and only lose 1 store TP over having your girder belt +1. Now there is one more thing I want to point out that is rather important, and that is this TP set, while it is the best one for DPS, only gives you 40 subtle blow, and that's only if you use path C for your headpiece. So if you actually want to cap that at the 50, we're going to have to try and get 10 subtle blow somewhere else here. In order to do that, I recommend you swap out the Epona's ring for this Chirich ring +1 here. This means we're obviously going to lose 3 double attack and 3 triple attack over using that Epona's earring. But if you have a more tank-minded setup and in any way care about the abilities that the enemy will be using against you, then it definitely is worth it to swap this ring into this setup so that you're giving the enemy the smallest amount of TP possible per swing. Another option, of course, is just committing to making sure that you have Myoshu Ichi up at all times, which also gives you a subtle blow effect of 10 that would cap you at the 50. Now, if you're still unable to hit dual wield 39 with your setup, remember that there are 4 slots that we're not using dual wield on in this particular gear setup. We could add floor gauntlets to our hands. That adds 5 dual wield and 3 triple attack. We could add Mochizuki Hakama +3 as our pants, which will add 10 dual wield. The Haverton ring +1 will add an additional 6 dual wield, or the normal quality ring will add 5. And the last thing we can do is, of course, switch our cape from double attack to dual wield for an additional 10. Now, of course, any of those swaps is going to lower the overall effectiveness of this set just a little bit, but adding that dual wield will definitely overwhelm any of the other statistics if you really are going for true TP gain without any magical haste. Next, let's move on to our dual wield 20 set, where we're trying to achieve dual wield 21 through our gear. This is for use when we have roughly 30% haste on us. Now, with all the gear we've gone over, we can achieve this 21 dual wield any number of ways. The best way, according to the spreadsheet and parsers, would be this set right here. It includes the Ryu Somen +1 on path C, Ninja Nodowa +2, a Telos earring, not the C-sense that you see in the picture, but a Telos earring, and a Brutal earring to pair with it, an Adamar jacket +1, path A, Adamar wrist +1, path A, gear ring matched with the Epona's ring, and our Tia's mantle with a double attack 10% trait on it, the Reki Yotai, once again, the Samnua tights, Herculean trousers at 4% triple attack, and the Seki Shuriken. Now, while this is the ideal configuration DPS-wise, there are a number of other configurations that are almost exactly the same as it on the DPS charts. Let me go ahead and show you some of the options in case you don't have some of these more difficult to get items. First, the Telos earring, that you obviously can tell I don't have, is another item just like the Reki Yotai that most people in your link shell are going to want because it's useful in almost any job. Therefore, it is one of those items that a lot of people do not have. If you also do not have it, then the Season's earring that I'm showing you here is the next best thing I would suggest you use in this slot. Now, the Reki Yotai, which is the other item that we addressed in our Dual Wield 40 set, we should also address here. Let's say you don't have this. Well, there are two easy options that I would suggest. First, this setup that you see here actually overshoots Dual Wield 21 by just 1 point as Dual Wield 22. So we could quite easily just swap in the Sheetal stone and get our Dual Wield 6 that we need, and we'll still have a total in this set of Dual Wield 21. Now, of course, we are losing that 4 store TP and 10 accuracy over the Reki Yotai, but it's still a very close comparison. Additionally, we can use the same trick that we used in the Dual Wield 40 set, where we just swap out the body piece for the Mochizuki chainmail +3, and then also add in a girder belt +1. Now, since we only technically need 3 more Dual Wield, we actually don't even need the +1 and can just use a regular girder belt here. What this will do is swap our triple attack, 4%, for a 10% Daken effect and 2 additional store TP. Also, please keep in mind that this gear set right here only has a total of 14 subtle blow, so 4 away from your cap of 50 that you need. So you either need to try and add it through some other way, just accept the fact that you're going to be 4 short of your subtle blow cap, or make sure that you have Myosho Ichi up at all times to make sure that you are capped. So there are a ton of options in regards to how it is you can achieve Dual Wield 21. So if you don't have these particular setups that I've discussed here, feel free to swap in some earrings or some other pieces of armor that will easily get you these numbers. Now, to show you just how much of a difference all of this makes, I'm going to go ahead and show you some real-life parsers of the sets that we've been using up until this point and how they perform against these sets that we've built here. Now, it's important to note that in all these parser tests you're about to see, we're not going to have any trust out to give us any buffs. That's important because the whole point of these sets is that's when they're going to be utilized, is when we don't have cap magical haste. We are expecting these two sets to perform much better in this situation than our previous sets, even including our best in slot Dual Wield 0 set that we went over in our last video. Let's see how all these perform. Now, we're just going to spend a few minutes recapping all the DPS numbers that we've gotten from our previous set so that it's fresh in everyone's mind. First off, our starting out gear set, which consisted of Domain Invasion gear, we were able to achieve 100 to 125 DPS when we had no trust out and no buffs from any external sources. When we then went to Ambuscade and ended up getting the Mumu +2 gear set, along with our Ambuscade Gokatai, our DPS now went up to 400 to 450 DPS, or an increase of almost 400%. So it was a huge jump that we took there just from going from Domain Invasion to our Mumu gear set. We then move on to our intermediate gear set video, which basically consisted of very easy to solo content for your gear. That increased our DPS to 450 to 500, so we didn't get anywhere near the increase that we did from that original jump from starting out to basic Mumu, but we did see a boost nonetheless. Now let's go over the 2 gear sets that we discussed in our previous video. First, the Elite Dual Wield 0 tank set. Now this consists primarily of Kendut Saba +1 gear. We saw a tremendous increase in DPS when we went to this setup, and it went up to 750 to 800 DPS, and we were finally able to start self-skill chaining, even though it was only about 5% of the time. So we were able to add about 50 skill chain DPS to our total as well. Next was our Elite Dual Wield Best in Slot TP setup. Now this consisted of the best in slot gear selection currently available. This boosted our DPS just a little bit more to 800 to 850 DPS, and we were now able to self-skill chain without trust about 15% of the time. So therefore our skill chain DPS was boosted to about 150 skill chain DPS. So our total was anywhere between 950 and 1000 DPS in our Elite Dual Wield Best in Slot TP setup. Now let's go ahead and see what we can achieve comparatively to these numbers with our new dual wield gear sets. So I'll go ahead and put the previous totals up there on the left hand side just so that it's still fresh in your mind. And then let's see what our Dual Wield 20 setup got us. As you can see, our overall DPS went up to 1000 to 1200 DPS. So we got about a 200 to 400 DPS boost there. Our SC damage also went up to 500 to 600 SC DPS because we are now able to self-skill chain about 75% of the time. So that means our skill chain damage went up by 350 to 450. This gave us a total increase of 550 to 850 DPS just by switching to this Dual Wield 20 gear set. So in essence, on the high end of the spectrum, almost doubled our DPS. It was an 150 to 185% increase over that Elite Dual Wield Best in Slot gear set. Now please keep in mind, this does not include any magic burst damage, which would make the disparagement between these two even higher, considering we would be magic bursting much more frequently with the Dual Wield 20 set than we would be with the Dual Wield 0 set, and no trust. Now let's see how high we can push these numbers when we go to our Dual Wield 40 gear set. With this set, our DPS was boosted to the 1100 to 1400 DPS range, and in addition to that, we also had 600 to 1000 skill chain DPS now, because we were self-skill chaining about 95% of the time in this setup. That's without any buffs from any trust. So we saw a boost in DPS over our Elite Dual Wield Best in Slot TP set by 300 to 600 DPS, and then an additional 450 to 850 skill chain DPS. That's a total increase of 750 to 1450 DPS increase. Now this does not include any increase to magic burst damage. So without including any of that, we've gotten 175 to 250% boost in damage over our Elite Dual Wield Best in Slot gear set by simply adding Dual Wield to our setup. The disparagement, of course, becomes even more obvious when we add in magic burst damage, because since we're self-skill chaining 95% of the time in the Dual Wield 40 setup, and only roughly 15% of the time in the Dual Wield Best in Slot TP setup, we're definitely going to transition to a lot more magic burst damage because we'll be magic bursting a lot more often. When we include that into these calculations, our DPS increases to a total of 3000 to 4000 DPS. That is a 300 to 400% increase over that Elite Dual Wield Best in Slot TP setup. Now, this is why Dual Wield is single-handedly the most important stat for us when it comes to increasing our overall DPS. Nothing else even comes close, and why you need to focus on it first and foremost. Now, as usual, I'm not going to have you just take my word for it. I'm going to go ahead and show you some videos here that'll show you real-life parser examples of all of these sets and exactly the DPS numbers they achieve, so you can kind of see the progression as we go through them. I'm going to start with the Elite Dual Wield 0 Best in Slot TP set. This will show you exactly what we were attaining last week without any buffs. It's going to self-skill chain about 15% of the time, even though we get a little bit more out of it in our video. Then I'll move on to the Dual Wield 20 gear set. That'll show you exactly kind of the increase in DPS that we'll get between stepping up between the Dual Wield 0 to Dual Wield 20. After you see that, well, then I'm going to go ahead and step it up to the Dual Wield 40 gear set so you can see the increase in damage and speed that we get by going between those two. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and throw in magic bursting into the whole setup and that Dual Wield 40 so you can see just exactly what kind of numbers you can achieve without any trust and any buffs on Ninja when you use this Dual Wield 40 gear set. Let's delve into it. Now, before we delve into the fight, I wanted to point out something here that can be very helpful, and that's the Gear Info add-on in the lower right-hand corner there. Now, I showed how to install this in my add-ons and plugins video, so if you want to know where to get it, go ahead and go there and get your information. But once it's installed, you see that in the very bottom of it, the DW number, that's going to represent how much dual wield gear you're presently wearing. Needed is actually going to calculate for you, involving all of your gear haste, magical haste, and job ability haste, just how much dual wield gear you need to reach that 80% reduction cap. So you always don't have to be doing the calculations in your head or wondering yourself. You can just look right there, see what you need, and make sure you're in your right gear setup. Obviously, since we have no buffs on us, it's showing that we need 39 dual wield as expected to reach that 80% reduction cap. The next thing that I want to point out is we are still using our Gokatai and Turret combination. Now, the Gokatai is going to give us a boost to our TP every tick dependent upon how much dual wield we have. If we have no dual wield gear on, it'll still give us 35 per tick for that 35 base rate we have on Ninja. So if you see my TP going up, that is why. When we are in our Dual Wield 40 set, we're actually getting 75 TP per tick, which is definitely helping with our TP gain. I also have a setup where I can get 100 TP per tick, where we go well above the Dual Wield that you see in this video, and that's really only useful for just trying to build TP before you enter a battle with a Gokatai. Okay, let's go ahead and see how these battles work out. The first one I'm going to show you is using the Dual Wield 0 Best in Slot TP setup from last week. Let's see how it goes. Okay, there we go. If you look on the right-hand side, you will see the DPS numbers are kind of right at where we expect them to be. That skill chain number is a little bit higher than we're expecting, but that's because we were actually able to get 3 skill chains off in that fight, when normally we only get off 2. So that was actually a little bit better DPS-wise than we would expect from that setup. Next, our Dual Wield 20 setup. As you'll notice, the Dual Wield number in the Gear Info add-on has now changed to 21. And that is the Dual Wield 21 set. As you can see, our DPS has increased to about 1000 damage as we would expect. Now our skill chain number is a little low, but that's because I got one less skill chain in the next fight than I was expecting to. So that made the overall skill chain numbers just a little bit less than we were expecting. Let's go ahead and see what it's going to look like now with our Dual Wield 40 setup. And there we go. As you can see, we're skill chaining much more frequently, and our DPS numbers and our skill chain damage numbers have gone up to reflect that. Let's go ahead and do one more, just to show you exactly that it wasn't a fluke. As you can see, the DPS numbers right in line with what we were expecting. Now the blade high damage for these two mobs wasn't exactly high, so that's why the skill chain damage is on the lower end of the spectrum. When blade high ends up critical hitting during all of its weapon skills, that's when you'll see it, get the higher numbers closer to 1000 skill chain damage that we were expecting. Now let's go ahead and move on to Magic Burst and see how that affects our overall DPS numbers when using the Dual Wield 40 set. We'll go ahead and do two of these back to back just to show you how reliable the damage is. Enjoy the show. And there you have it. As you can see, it's very easy to achieve 3,000 to 4,000 DPS when using Magic Burst and this setup. And we haven't even included things like Rima weapons yet. We're still using just our regular old ambuscade weapons. So it is actually pretty impressive what Ninja can achieve without any buff trust support and literally just a white mage to cure them. As time goes on, the gear in these sets may change. I'll go ahead and post any updates in the future in the top posted comments, so please be sure to check there in case some of these gear selections have changed by the time you're watching this video. I hope everyone found that helpful. Have a great week, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy.